So today I'm going to talk to you about the Wind Financial Terminal. You've probably all heard of Reuters and from the point of view of Bloomberg as well. However, in Chinese financial markets, 90% of financial professionals use the Wind Terminal. So let's evaluate it and see whether or not this is useful. As you can see from the screenshot, we have here what would be a fairly typical screen overview of financial markets. We have the international markets and also things like gold and silver commodities. If we go to the home page of the Wind Financial Terminal, we can immediately see that there's a large amount of functionality. So in that respect, we can go firstly to stocks, which is obviously what we're more familiar with, and we can look at what's happening in terms of individual stocks, watch lists, market sentiments, top movers, and so forth. So let's take a look at, for example, the top movers. Clearly, I'm recording this whilst China is closed, but we can take a look at a number of the issues and see what's happening with them. As with Bloomberg, you just double click and you go and you drill into it. Interestingly, even though the markets are closed, a few trades are still going through, resulting in a little bit of pricing, but obviously this is something which is based on closed market prices. In terms of the individual names or whatever, we can also have things like the top movers. And also we can get a whole lot of information. There's an Excel data center, which you need to install an API to download data on, and effectively you can from that get data for your projects, for your dissertations, and for your assignments. In terms of the actual news itself, obviously very China-centric, A market, also the H market in Hong Kong, and the China Next market, but it does have international stocks, and that's very useful. It also has bonds, and in that respect, there's a fair amount of capability in the bonds. You can immediately drill down and see these issues. For example, this is a Ministry of Finance issue, and we can see the market maker quotations there. Obviously, telephone-based market, so we don't get full information, we get historic reporting information. But so the Ministry of Finance, 1.99%, and then you've got your how long the issue is to its maturity. You can do a lot of stuff that you can also do on Bloomberg. For example, you can look at the yield curves, and you can also screen for various bonds, look at the yield history, and again, export to Excel. There's some credit data, not as extensive as you can get from direct subscription to credit rating agencies, and obviously credit rating agencies are an extra add-on pay feature for Bloomberg and Reuters. So in that respect, you can, if you're looking at bonds, get possibly a richer depth from that. The commodities functions, there's a whole lot of commodities that you can get. Notice the international commodity markets are all there. CBOT, London Metal Exchange, London ICE, New York ICE. So in that respect, the commodities information is very rich, and that allows you to do a whole lot of stuff like spread analysis and so forth. Also a few more sort of traditional academic statistics like correlations and regression, volatility as well. So a very useful approach to get commodities. And in that respect, we can also get a quick overview, for example, of quotes. And we can see immediately what's happening in these various futures markets. Let's go to London. Let's go to Brent oil. So here, this is exactly the same as you have on the intraday chart for Bloomberg. So this screen will look very familiar to anyone who's used to Bloomberg. And there you will see essentially the intraday links. Now, this is a feature that I really like. You can actually go right the way down to break it down towards all the micro trades within a minute. So you can do analysis on high frequency trading and so forth, which is a very powerful tool. In terms of let's just go back to the home again. In terms of functionality, also competing with Reuters in this respect, the foreign exchange functionality, and again, the centricity is from China perspective. So you will find that the cross rates are focused more on obviously the Chinese yuan, the renminbi, and what's happening on that. But obviously, if you are trading there, you want to know literally what's happening. Obviously, a more fixed rate than we're used to, but because of this earlier functionality I said about the sort of minute and 5 minute sort of functionality and so forth, you can get real sensitivity even within the small bands 6.8110 to 6.80050. So you can get a sort of trading feel for what's going on there. But even though it's China centric, you do obviously have all the other cross rates that are obviously important in that perspective. Look at, create and adapt your own monitor as well, and likewise, as you can do with all the others, you can take a look at the top movers and so forth. There is also fund functionality. Now, the Chinese fund industry is not as developed as the fund industry in the US, in Europe or whatever, but the Hong Kong market is, and you can certainly get the Hong Kong funds, and you can drill down into those funds and get a sort of good idea of what's going on with those, including some sort of data in that respect. The descriptors are also there. So again, that's something which sort of more used to from sort of Bloomberg functionality. So in that respect, you can get a quick oversight of product profiles and so forth. Obviously takes time to sort of come through, but there we have China Large Cap Select Fund, and you can see who the various managers were at different dates, and even what their degree status is. So if you want to follow the manager rather than the fund, that functionality is there and actually superior to Bloomberg. Obviously, that's something that Morningstar does in Europe and the US. Likewise, you can compare it against peer funds, which means that you can take a look at the universe of funds and see how they're all doing, and you can compare their performance. If you go along, you can also get annualized returns as well. Obviously, if you want to do Sharpe ratio analysis or whatever, you then find your risk-free rate and do the same. In terms of returns data, the return data that they have, you'll see that they've effectively got the return data there. Attribution analysis, so in other words, drilling down to the actual instrument level, so here you've got various industries, and you can see that this particular fund, China Large Cap Select, has really been held back. So it's got a negative relative weighting of -28, so it's avoiding the financial sector totally. That is where it's getting its contribution from is largely from information technology and its industry effect. And the industry effect is where it's taking the biggest bets, so you're actually getting the biggest active return from that. So really quite a very powerful amount of information that you can get from this. Also, you can even do ESG analysis. This is a new feature, and in that respect, ESG is still in its infancy, but they're using various international indices or whatever. Here you have a spiderweb diagram, which effectively you can look at a Likert type score to see where you are in the things. You can go back in time. So in that respect, a new function, but actually obviously something that shows that the markets in China are becoming more and more advanced as you go on. Also balance sheet and income statements and so forth, which again, very big. So you can go and drill down right the way to the funds management fee level, custody fee. Remember, sometimes fees are bundled or whatever. So very powerful information. And obviously, if you extrapolate that, there's a lot that you can do. For example, for a project, for example, to look at how a fund is performing, how its cost structure or whatever is impacting the returns. So a lot of interesting stuff that can be done. In terms of indices, I showed you that they cover the global markets as well, but also they have their own indices, the wind indices, which same as Bloomberg. So bear in mind that indices are very expensive. MSCI, you have to subscribe to and pay separately from Bloomberg Reuters. So in that respect, having an indices is this comes with a subscription, and again you can get some quite detailed breakdowns on that, including effectively what's happening on the bottom here, the volume and so on. So you can see share price declining, but most of the volume is on the sell side in terms of capital flow. So again, very useful stuff, and likewise they've got indices for commodities as well as bonds. So you will never be stuck for not having an index as such. Obviously, you won't have the same degree of market coverage as, for example, S&P 500 or full depth of MSCI, which is the deepest of the international indices. The financial news is broken down between research reports, which is useful, and actually you can get research reports here are more freely shared by the investment banks than they are in the US and Europe, largely because obviously they're using them to generate trade, and it's more sort of here they're trying to build market share. But that said, you've got financial news. The news sources are obviously biased towards being from China and that part of the world, but there's still plenty of news. I haven't pointed out, I'm using this terminal in English. Obviously, in a Chinese context, the terminal would obviously be in Chinese, and so in that respect. And also, just hasten to add the movements in China. Green means going down, red means going up. But obviously, I've reversed that for the purposes of this demonstration. Now, there's a lot of statistical stuff, and certainly on China itself, this is the go-to database, because there's a lot of stuff on China that you can drill down right the way to regional. So not just Shanghai, but you can go to region in a segment of Shanghai to get data on what's going on and so forth. So very powerful statistical tool. And a macro database. So clicking on China macro database, that you can see is everything that you would want from an academic point of view to drill down into things. So you can look at inflation, and you can see inflation broken down into all these various components and so forth. So contrary to public opinion in the West, i.e. there isn't much data in China, there is data there, and in fact you can sort of break it down into the 36 major cities and so on. So you can look at, for example, service prices of liquefied petroleum gas in 36 cities. Now that is obviously very granular level data. From a portfolio function, it's also got what you need to manage a fund, and in that respect, it's obviously useful for the portfolio construction class that we teach. So in that respect, it has a risk management tool as well. All of this you've got to pay extra for, though, obviously. But it also has corporate actions, and you can analyze performance and so on. And you can even, on the Me button, keep your own customized approaches and ways of doing things. And notice, by the way, that you've got both horizontal and vertical controls, which obviously make for very quick ability to go through the tool. You will need this Excel add-in if you're downloading any information into Excel. So if you're doing any projects or assignments or whatever, you need that. What is actually really superior to Bloomberg and Reuters is the fact that they've also put API interfaces for other coded languages. In particular, for those who study MSc FinTech at Strathclyde, we also have API interfaces and MATLAB interfaces. And obviously, that allows a great deal of processing and functioning. For example, if you're building an efficient frontier, in Excel, you would take your variances, covariances, and build it from that and create a single efficient frontier based upon your outcome. If you do it in MATLAB, you can do that on 10,000 iterations, so much more powerful, and allows you to understand better the estimation risk in creating that. For those of you that don't understand what I'm talking about there, that comes in our course on mean variance portfolio construction, which is in the second semester. Likewise, there are lots of tools that we use in statistics, regressions, volatility, correlations, or using also portfolio construction and CAPM, for example. So that's all built into it, which is, again, quite nice, because it means you don't need to necessarily download everything, go into SPSS and analyze it and then come back out again, or whatever. So in that respect, there's even a back tester, which is very useful for, again, demonstrating if you say created a trading structure, an investment process that you want to test over time, then obviously you can do back testing. There's a risk function, but obviously, like any financial system, these are effectively add-ons. You pay extra for these sort of things. And then obviously some more on the wind functionality and so forth, and also what's going on in the options market. I mentioned the futures market, but also the Nanhao futures and the Haitong futures market. So there you have it in terms of what we have on their wind financial terminal. It's very powerful. Students can use that if they prefer it to Bloomberg, and certainly if you go into the Chinese financial marketplace, 90% of professionals use it, so it's worth knowing about.